Welcome to the Real Estate and Wealth Podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of real estate investing and wealth creation. This podcast is brought to you by Calvert Home Mortgage Investment Corporation, your trusted, caring, and responsive short-term mortgage lender in Alberta and Ontario. We explore strategic and tactical solutions to elevate your real estate portfolio, drawing insights from seasoned Canadian investors and trusted advisors. In each episode, we dive into various aspects of real estate investing, including market trends, property analysis, financing strategies, risk management, and much more. Whether you're a seasoned real estate investor looking to expand your portfolio or a beginner taking those first steps, this podcast is for you. Today on the podcast, we have Luc Boiron. I feel like this man needs no introduction, but Luc, for those who don't know about you, please introduce yourself. Tell us what you have on the go.
Yeah, so I am a flipper and wholesaler, real estate investor out of Ontario. I live in Ottawa now, but I'm from Toronto. I've bought and sold close to 1,000 houses now. I buy under my brand Cash House Buyer, and then we assign properties under Off Market Bliss. And I flip houses, I wholesale houses, I have rentals, about 100 rental units as well, at Airbnbs. Currently converting a motel as well, or renovating a motel. So I've been kind of started investing in real estate in 2007 when I was in school. Finished law school, got an MBA, quit law, and started flipping houses full time in 2016. And that's what I've been doing since.
So flipper, wholesaler, landlord, law degree, MBA, total bum. Why are we even wasting our time? There's no value that can be exchanged here. Of course, I'm kidding. You said a lot of things right there. I'm picking up on three key major business arms: flipper, wholesaler, landlord. Which of those do you want to talk about first?
Talk about the wholesaling and flipping more. That's what I focus on these days.
Okay. So wholesaling. Why don't you just tell our audience? Ryan knows what a wholesaler is. I know what a wholesaler is. I've heard some of your stories. Some of them still haunt me to this day, specifically the bathtub, which will remain a mystery, like the can opener in Suits. But why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what a wholesaler is and kind of what segment of the market they serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started flipping full time, I was getting too many projects to manage myself, and I was actually giving up a lot of equity to partners and things like that. So what I found was what I did best was buying good deals. And that's what I wanted to focus on. So at one point, my first deal was actually, I think 7 renovations going at the same time as flips. I bought another deal. It was a great deal. And I didn't feel like I could take the renovations on. Called another investor I knew. He came out to see the property as well, and then ended up selling the rights to close on the property to him. So I signed the contract to him, and he bought it from the seller. And in exchange, I got an assignment fee. And what I realized was, because that is my strength, buying properties at a discount, I should do more of that. And so I started building a business around doing a lot of that. And I did fewer flips and a lot more wholesales. I think our best year, we bought 260 something houses, bought and sold 260 something houses in a mix of everything, but a lot of that was assignments.
So that's more than a house, more than 2 homes in 3 days.
Yeah, basically a house, more than a house of business day, probably, something like that. Yeah. And that's just the ones that closed, because obviously, even in a great market, buying great deals, there's reasons we market and contact sellers who have either property distress or seller distress, or a combination of the two, usually a combination of the two. That means the property's run down and they maybe don't have money to fix it, or they inherited it, there's some sort of emotional issue or attachment, and they're not able to complete the project themselves. So they call us, we're willing to fix up these properties, or they're not willing to fix them up, so we buy it from them. There's also like embarrassment issues. If someone's a hoarder, they don't want this out on the market, and their neighbors are walking through seeing how they lived and things like that, right? So, and there's ease and speed. So people, for whatever reason, they call us, they sell to us, and then we can decide whether we take that down ourselves or we sell the rights to buy that property to another investor. So we were doing a lot of wholesaling for a while there. And as the market shifted, a lot of investors pulled back on flipping. A lot of, gurus out there were saying, you can't flip.
Right.
But we, as, our business Cash House Buyer, Off Market Bliss is the line where we assign properties. Cash House Buyer is where we kind of take them down ourselves. It's flips. We saw us and some of the other wholesalers putting out good deals and nobody was buying them.
Right.
It's like, well, there's money being left on the table here. Let's ramp up our flipping instead of doing a couple deals at a time. Let's ramp it up. And that's what we did. So we're flipping quite heavily. Ottawa is probably our main market for it, but we flip kind of a little bit in Vancouver and all over Ontario, really.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you basically started off focusing on flipping. You had a great deal. You had 7 going on at once. I think you said the number was. You assigned it to somebody else. So you kind of, I don't want to say fell into it by accident, but it seems like flipping was the first goal and then wholesaling became an avenue after that. I loved what you talked about, the ease and speed, also kind of the shame. What are some of the other pain points? Because, generally speaking, people think, okay, in a good market, real estate should be able to transact pretty well to the full open market, if you will, being advertised on the MLS. What are some of the other pain points that you solve as a wholesaler for sellers? Like what value are you creating for the sellers? Because I don't think a lot of people understand the role that wholesalers play. Like you guys do awesome stuff. So like, why don't you speak to some of the, maybe 1 or 2 deals that maybe stand out to you as a wholesaler?
Yeah, well, I can give you several quick examples. One example I really liked, turned it into a rental, actually, a duplex in Ottawa, single family bungalow. The sellers were older. He was in his 80s and they had some of their best friends had like a senior's condo open up. The unit next to them was for sale.
Right.
They wanted to sell their house really quickly because they wanted to buy that unit and live in the condo next to their best friends. In addition, it was wintertime in Ottawa and they didn't want to deal with showings because they didn't drive anymore. They didn't want to have to leave and walk around in the cold while people were touring their home. So for them, it was an ease thing. This wasn't, let's get the most money out of it. It's like, let's sell it quickly, make sure it's sold. Let's go buy that unit next to our best friends so we can enjoy the last few years of our life, So that was one. Another one, the lady, I think, had something like 12 cats. And she was worried that if realtors were coming in and not paying attention, that they'd let some of the cats out of the house, they'd get hit by a car and die. So if she could sell it to us privately, she didn't have to deal with a bunch of realtors showing the home and people coming in. We had another one where their basement crumbled. The foundation crumbled into their basement. The whole brick foundation of an old house fell in a corner. And they needed to sell real quick because it really wasn't supported. There was a couple 2x4s on an angle up this old house.
Sounds kind of sketchy.
It was
like a house of cards almost.
So, and they had somewhere to move to. So we bought this immediately after we signed it with their permission. We had temporary supports put in, and then we had a foundation company come and fix the foundation, waterproof it properly, but also rebuild it. And then we were able to sell it on the MLS still as a fixer-upper because we didn't fix the upstairs of the house. We just fixed the scary part that the part of the basement fell in. Like we're talking, the washer and dryer were surrounded to the top with bricks, and that was your basement wall that had fallen into it. It was like a slide into the basement.
That sounds really safe. Yeah,
no, not at all. So it was terrifying to people, but the right price, we'll do it. I had some other ideas, but yeah, definitely. Like it's often when someone inherits a property and it's overwhelming for them and they don't know what to do. You sometimes will have people who are just sick of their property, like a landlord who's just dealt with a really bad tenant and they've got a bunch of other things. They're making good money elsewhere and I just take care of this for me. I don't want to deal with it. I know I'm leaving money on the table here. I could make more if I wanted to, but
the value you're creating takes priority over that extra dollar. So the value for sellers is immense. I've even heard of situations where the seller can be in financial distress. They need money by a certain time. The wholesaler can work with them and say, hey, here's a non-refundable deposit. You can pick your move out date. So some people look at wholesalers in a certain light. I look at them in the manner of, hey, they're providing a valuable service to people that can't necessarily be served by the MLS.
Yes.
And they're doing it at the schedule or on command of the seller when the market won't be able to meet those needs.
That made me remember 3 other quick examples. One was seller defaulted on, I believe it was their mortgage payment, but the sheriff was coming to kick them out the next week. We closed on that house in 3 business days. They called us 3 business days later. We owned it. And then they stayed in the house 45 days until they could find a rental of their own.
Dignity.
But they would have been kicked out by the sheriff and not had anywhere to go and had no money to go anywhere. In this case, they got the majority of their money. We kept a hold back with the lawyer to make sure they moved out, but they got the majority of their money. So they were able to use that money, go find a rental, move, and then they weren't just kicked out onto the street with their kids. There was one. Another one is a similar theme. It wasn't about the quick close, but sometimes they need some money for somewhere to go, or they have somewhere to go, but they need to sell it first. So they have some money from that, go to the next place.
Like a bridge, yeah.
Yeah, so that's when we kind of can be flexible, which is very difficult to do with selling on the MLS, but it's similar. Do a bit of a holdback. They can stay in the house for an extra week, an extra month, whatever it is. We agree to that. And that way they get the money from the closing to use to go somewhere else. And one other thing, we don't do this one often, but we've given sellers mortgages where they have, like, they own it outright or they have a low mortgage. We'll register a second behind them so they can take that money and go use that as a down payment. So they might have a lot of money. They might be able to go buy another house in cash.
Right.
But they can't do that until they can get out of this house.
Right.
Until they can sell it. But they don't even have the money to do a deposit when they're making offers on a property. So here we give them that. They can now go make offers on other properties. And then we do this in that situation and in others where we can give sellers flexible closings. So yeah, you can move your closing up 30 days sooner or 30 days later so that, you know, if you haven't found a place yet, you can push your closing back by 30 days. That kind of flexibility doesn't necessarily exist, especially if a retail buyer is buying that to live in.
And they need to close on a certain date because their money's coming from somewhere, or they need to have possession a certain date. So
we're always just trying to find a way to kind of serve the sellers so that we can be of the most value. And therefore, by providing value, it's how we were able to buy these properties at a price that works for us.
I love that. That was a great summary of a lot of the services that you do. So that's...
Yeah, at the end of the day, it sounds like you're just a master problem solver. You're having extremely creative solutions for people who are in unique scenarios.
Let's kind of parlay that into the buyer side of that, though, because I think that'll dovetail nicely into flipping. So we've talked about the supply side of your business, which is typically depreciated housing stock.
Yes.
Now you acquire that. Let's walk our listeners through, okay, now that you've obtained the contract, then what do you do with the contract, and kind of who's your end client there on that end?
So if we're not going to try to necessarily flip that ourselves, or, you know, let's say that's not the route we're going to take, the end client is usually another investor who's going to want to do something with it. So it kind of depends what the product's going to be. Sometimes there'll be a landlord, someone who's going to convert the property. They might take a bungalow, turn it into 2 or 3 units. Or it's someone who wants to flip the house. We've even had some people who want to buy it to live in. But typically the process is we get the property under contract. We take a bunch of pictures of the property, and then our dispositions team, call them, they're the ones who sell to our investor buyers. They will prepare an email with all the details of the properties, the square footage, the price we're asking, the opportunity, and they'll send that out to our buyers list. And then people will contact them if they're interested in viewing the property. We typically do 1 showing time for whoever wants to come, kind of not a free-for-all, but it's because if too many people are interested, we have to limit it. But a few people can come through all at the same time. They get 1 opportunity, and usually later that day, they make us an offer on the property and we come to an agreement. We've then assigned the rights to the contract, and then it closes on the day we've already agreed to. So if we say, hey, this is going to close on September 30th, then the buyer from us is supposed to close September 30th. That's the way it works. Preset closing date already.
So if you're a real estate investor looking for flips, looking for burrs, looking for discounted properties, should they be paying attention to a wholesaler list?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? When I started this, there wasn't a lot of people doing a lot of wholesaling. And one of the common objections people always had is, well, why would you be selling it if it's a good deal? Just flip it yourself. Right. Well, for one, I don't have unlimited funds.
Right.
I borrow from you guys regularly, but I don't have unlimited
funds. And we
funds.
Appreciate that very much.
I don't have unlimited management capacity. And there's a lot of transaction costs that can go into a deal without me doing anything to the property. So, you know, in Ontario, there's land transfer tax, double if it's in Toronto.
Yep.
I'm paying lawyer fees to close the deal, lawyer fees to finance it, lawyer fees to close the sale of the deal. I'm paying realtors to sell the property. That's
interest, lender fees.
Yeah, interest, lender fees, insurance, all of that without having done any renovations to it. So with all of those numbers, if you could consider, well, I bought this for this price, I could sell it for this on the open market. Already a chunk of that is gone just from that. Now, ideally, someone would buy it, fix it up, and they're pushing that resale value higher that can make that spread worthwhile. But you could say, oh, well, you've got $100,000 spread on that. Okay, but I'm now only going to make 50 if I do nothing to it and have all these costs, right? So I might be better off selling it to someone for, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, and then they're going to push that value up further, and they're going to make a larger amount of money. But I don't have to manage that whole project. I make part of that fee. Because if, let's say I buy something for $500,000 and it's worth $600,000 on the market, I don't make $100,000.
No.
That's not how it would work at all.
You know, you're 5% on the 600 plus. So,
exactly.
I mean, I'm sure you have a formula, and, you know, we don't need to talk about that, but I think what you're getting at is what is the greatest return on your time and your investment on it?
Yes.
If it's, I'm phenomenal at bird dogging deals and I see that I can create value for myself and an end buyer, well, then I'm just going to choose to do that. But if it's a deal where you need to do something specific to it to realize that value, then that might be one that you undertake yourself.
Yes. And it also depends on our buyers. So most of our stuff gets sent out to our buyers list. It's really just a fraction where it's sometimes a very specific seller situation where they really almost need to be protected. They have something very specific to them that we have to make sure we're the ones to close to make sure it's going to happen. Usually, really, we're the ones to close when it's a very quick close. So we don't have time to put everything together, try to find a buyer who can close in time. That's often when we'll do it.
Do you know any good lenders?
You guys have funded, I don't even want to say how quickly you guys have funded some deals because I don't want that pressure on you guys, but some very, very quick funding that no other lender would believe is possible, to be honest. But yeah, and then the other thing is we'll send it out to our buyers list. And if we don't find a buyer or make a, let's say, way too small an amount compared to what we could flipping, then we might decide that we want to take that one down ourselves.
Yeah.
For people who are looking to buy properties off you that you advertise, do you have any best practices? What you recommend they do to get their ducks in a row in order to purchase a property off you?
Yeah, one of the things is don't go in cold. Like if you've never bought any property before or investment property, buying from a wholesaler is probably not the best option.
Right.
Because there's quicker timelines, there's more pressure. And if you're not sure what you're doing, it's not a good idea for your first property. You should know how you're going to finance it ahead of time because we don't take conditional offers typically, right? Unless there's something specific on the property, it's not a conditional offer. So you need to know that you're going in firm. You're offering, we expect the deposit next day, and you are committed to buying this property now. So you need to make sure you have financing. That's, some of our buyers might talk to you guys or, however they might agree, but they make sure they're pre-vetted. Typically, these properties in the condition they're in, banks may not want to lend to them. It depends. To be clear, some of our properties are very nice too.
Yeah.
We sell some properties, we assign some properties that are already beautiful homes. Just maybe their situation was specific. That's why they sold to us. But a really rundown property, a TD bank's not going to want to touch that.
Nope.
So you have to make sure, you're working with a lender that's going to fund that. And also our assignment fee. Let's say we bought a property for $500,000. We're selling it. We sign it for $520,000. That $20,000 assignment fee, very few lenders will finance, let's say 80% of 520. They'll finance 80% of 500, which is 400,000. And then that 20,000 will be all cash from you.
Has to be paid cash.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I only know of one lender that does the assignment fee with little down.
You know what? But, I have seen some big banks do it on rentals. But it's hit or miss. It's very specific. It's, someone who's maybe buying their first rental property, or if they're buying it to live in and rent part of it or something like that. I've seen some of the big banks do it, but it's rare. Most private lenders will not do it, but that is one of the advantages with Calvert is that you guys will fund, let's say, I'm taking 80%. You guys have obviously different options, but 80% of 520,000, which would be funding 416,000 instead of, so the buyer would need to come up with 104,000.
Correct.
Instead of going to a different lender, they'd have to come up with 120,000.
Right. And there's also the matter of title insurance too. So that's kind of the other hiccup that you come up against. So that's cool. So I like that we talked about that. Let's talk a little bit about flipping. I asked you before the show, you and I have done a lot of business. It's in the tens of millions for sure. I know the number. I'm not going to say, but it's definitely greater than 10 million. Since March of 2022, it's been a really tough environment for real estate investors, specifically flippers. I saw a lot of investors navigate challenges. I saw many fail. I have seen you continue to thrive in what was a very challenging and volatile market. You consistently turn profits. You execute. How? How? Like, how do you look at a project and how do you manage it? And this is where I think there could be a lot of value for our listeners is that there's a lot of flippers. There's people who do it, mom and pop. There's individuals. There's people that are opening up corporations. Different people assess risk different ways. I listened to your podcast. This was probably 6-8 months ago. You talked about managing your business in terms of bets and that you always think in terms of what is the greatest probability of success. I don't know how that would relate, but how did you do it? And, there's a lot of blood in the streets in Ontario. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. You're here. You look fantastic. Your business is doing as well as ever. How?
Actually, the thinking in bets is a great way of thinking of it. There's this book I refer to by a professional poker player, Andy Duke, called Thinking in Bets. And my understanding, quick summary of it is basically, it's not, if you play a hand that has a 20% chance of winning and you win, you still made the wrong decision. And same thing if you play a hand that had an 80% chance of winning and you lose, you made the right decision because you played the hand that gave you the best shot of winning. So I think of it that way. I mean, that also goes into, we never bought based on, well, the market's going up, so I'm going to be able to sell this for more later, and never forecasted out our flips that way. And if anything, when the market was falling, I would forecast ours to be falling, right? Mm-hmm. Especially through 2022, as we were buying, we're saying, okay, this is going to have sell for less. There's also more factors to take into account. We deal with properties all over, like city properties, but also rural properties, small towns. And it was adjusting the price for what we could predict would be happening in the market. There's that. Executing quickly is important.
So let's talk about adjusting the price, though.
Yes.
So does that mean that you are just you're negotiating sharper? Is that a logical takeaway from that?
Sometimes it's negotiating sharper. Sometimes it's not. There isn't even the option to negotiate. This is the price, but do I want to do it or not? So it's evaluating when I run my numbers. So, and one of the things we had discussed possibly talking about is kind of what my buy box is.
Okay.
Or, and my buy box is everything. I will basically buy anything at the right price. Now, I've been to properties that the right price means they would have to pay me to buy it. I've been to many properties like that, actually. They would have to buy me to buy it because there's that much wrong with it. So my margin on a property is much tighter. You have a condo apartment in a building where there's many identical units. There's recent comparables. They're all in approximately similar condition. It's a very light cosmetic renovation. That's very easy and they're selling quickly. It's very easy for me to get comparables on. My margin can be much tighter on that. I have a lot of comfort there.
Well, the market's giving you that information, that confirmation. They're telling you, we will buy this at this price all day long.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's concept of risk-adjusted returns.
Okay.
And for me, the more risk a deal has, the higher my return should be.
100%.
So now compare that to a very remote rural property. It's a century home built in 1880. There's logs holding up the home. There's major issues. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's no comparables because this is more land or less land, and it has these issues and that issues. Well, my margin on that is going to have to be significantly higher to take into account the risk on that property. Okay. So that's the same thing, like making the right bet from the beginning. Now, if I'm exactly right, then I actually make a good margin. If I was a little wrong on some of those things, my margin's tighter, but I'm not losing money on that deal.
Right.
And if I was wrong the other way, I make way more money. That's great.
So, okay.
So do you have a rule of thumb of you need to buy a property at X discount of the as-is value?
I don't price it like that. I think it's a very simple spreadsheet that I put together in like 2017. It just calculates out all of the line items that go into a transaction. So it's got all these pre-formatted cells on the left that say, it's going to be this much fee on the mortgage. I'm going to borrow this much amount, it's this much fee, it's this rate. I'm going to have it for this many months. Insurance is going to cost me this much. Legal fees are this much for everything. Realtor commissions are this, et cetera, et cetera. Those are essentially fixed for standard deals. And then all you have to do is fill out typically 3 cells, which are purchase price, renovation amount, and sale price. And then that splits out a profit amount by using the pre-formatted cells, calculates land transfer tax, et cetera. So for a straight cosmetic simple renovation, I typically aim for 10% of the purchase price in profit, or a minimum of $25K if it happens to be a low price point. And from there, it's not in the cells, but we adjust up, or we'll adjust our conservative exit values or renovation numbers up to account for the difference. And that's where we build in our extra profit above that.
And when the market was decreasing in Ontario, was it still 10% of the purchase price, or are you being more aggressive with?
It was, except that there's different things. So when I was talking about adjusting our price, part of that is what's the sale price. So one of the things I was looking at is how quickly things are selling. So I'd look in certain markets. Now, a lot of the time, a lot of flippers in Ontario, they're used to selling everything. Everything sells right away. Unless you're completely overpriced, it's selling right away. So when I wasn't selling in like big cities where things are selling quickly, I'm selling a little bit outside. I would use some tools to try to look at how quickly things were selling. And one of the quick back of the napkin almost ways I would do it is I would look at how many, let's say, detached homes are currently listed in that geographic area, right? How many detached homes are listed? How many have sold in the past 30 days, in the past 90 days?
Right.
So if I look at an area and there's 30 detached homes on the market for sale and 2 have sold in the past 30 days, that's 15 months of inventory. So I'm going, okay, that's not great. But that also means 2 houses have sold.
Right.
And if I want to be one of those 2 houses, let's say I want to sell in 1 to 2 months on the market, 2 to 4 houses are going to sell if it's following, that
continued trend. Yes.
What price am I going to have to list that to be one of those 2 to 4 houses? So I have one of the properties that I sold, and you guys financed it. There was not a lot selling at the time. It wasn't far from Ottawa, but that pocket, not a lot was selling at the time. So it was something similar to that. It was 2 or 3 had sold, 30 something detached on the market. The comparable said I should sell for like $675. I ran my numbers selling in that like $575 because I needed to make it work much lower. I listed it, I think at $640 something. After 2 weeks, not much interest, dropped the price to $599. A week later, sold it for $590, made $80,000 in profit. The market said that house, based on the ones that sold, said it should have sold for $675. And this was at a much worse time than it is now. Market was falling, uncertainty, but I built in selling it for a much lower price so that I was one of the ones that would sell. I don't want to chase the market down. No. I don't want to take 8 months of paying private mortgages and the market falling, and then maybe I end up selling it for less than the $590 anyways after all of my extra carrying costs. Well, I'm going to discount the price to be one of the ones that sells. So that's how I ran my numbers on that one. That's not something we have to do often, especially in areas with regular sales.
Right.
But that's one of the ways I'm adjusting for risk, not in necessarily my formula of profit number, but my exit value, my ARV, but much lower than what the market had said, so that I had comfort I'd be able to sell for that or more.
That's awesome. So thinking bets, the probability there, making sure you're buying at the right price, also pricing in, building in contingency into your buy to make sure that it could still work at lower numbers, which is good.
And part of the reason we're also, made it through is just I have a really great team that works with me.
Yeah. I can speak to that.
Both on the renovation side, but also in the rest of the business. Everyone's kind of pulled together to make it through, knowing the market's rougher. Everyone's kind of pulling together. Our renovation team runs ragged because we didn't do nearly as many renovations. So managing it has become a much bigger operation.
Before I interjected, you were about to talk about timelines too. So keeping it on schedule, if you will.
Renovations.
Yeah. How do you manage that aspect of it? Because a lot of the times we work with new investors and they say, this investor quoted me 60. This one said 100. This one said 120. Oh, it's a 6-week reno. Call them 6 months in. I need 3 more months. I've heard all of these stories. So has Ryan. Yeah. How do you set up a project for success, and how do you make sure that it's progressing as it should?
Yeah. I don't always do it as well as we should.
Okay.
But some of the key things are making sure you have a plan from the get-go to follow, because if you're trying to figure out as you go, you don't plan ahead for all these things.
Right.
So the sooner you can have, before closing, if you're going to need drawings for permits, get that done. Get your drawings done. Get your designer in before it closes if possible, or immediately. And things we're working on, doing now regularly with my project managers, my team is they work on immediately creating mood boards. Like we have one
mood board.
Yeah, mood board, design board.
Okay.
And it's basically, this is one that the roof burnt off of. It's actually a rental of mine that we're rebuilding, but the roof burnt off of it. And we are not even at our framing inspection, but we already have tiles picked out. We have bathroom fixtures ordered. We know what all the finishes are going to be. And in this case, we're actually going to, have it in a sea can on the property, in a container on the property, so that it's ready to go as, again, we're just at our kind of framing inspection phase. There's still all the rest to do, but by the time they're there, everything's going to be picked out on site. You're not changing plans. It's decided. And that saves a lot of time, because it might be like, oh, actually, I want this tile. Or, you know what? No, you laid that tile, but I actually think it's better that we pull that up and now put vinyl plank down. Changing these plans. Oh, shoot, we should have put a window in there.
Yeah.
Can we cut that out and redo? As the more things you're changing as you go, stops the progress, it stops the flow, and it can delay getting materials, getting trades in. And again, this is to the best of our abilities. At one house, I want to list next week. We ordered the garage door 5 weeks ago, and it was supposed to be 2 to 3 weeks. It's still not in. So the only thing missing on this house is the garage door. It's a custom. Right. And, we try, and we honestly should have ordered it a little bit sooner. So that one's going to delay us an extra week or so just over the garage door. That's one example of a delay. Luckily, it's only a week, but there could be so much more.
And it's only a garage door, but yes. Kind of what I heard there is, you're taking advantage of the time before closing, kind of your free time, lining up permits. And then, you have a design board, you're picking things out ahead. But I mean, if I had to state it succinctly, you're thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead. So when you get to that next stage, the decisions have been made, the materials in a sea can, you have the contractor lined up. You're managing 2 to 3 steps ahead rather than just what's in front of your feet.
Yeah. And one of the things I actually find very difficult as we flip a lot of houses is knowing when to stop. So we have, it was a common thing, and we're working on not making it a common thing, and it hasn't been lately, but that we would start something and then go, you know what, now that we've done this looks bad. We need to pull that out and change it.
Right.
So
what's good enough?
Yes, what's good enough, but also deciding and committing to that. What I'm saying is ahead of time, right? As we were talking about this, you make that plan and you say, you know what, no, this is what we're doing. And it has to be something major for us to then decide to change it out. You know what that can mean is doing a little more digging, like at the beginning, as soon as you close on the property, dig in, hey, are we going to be able to keep this? Are we going to be able to keep this, electrical or this or that? So that it's not a surprise partway through. So you finish all this stuff and then, oh shoot, you know what? Let's actually take this wall down.
Right.
But we already laid the floor down. We got to pull it up and now go take the wall out. You're ruining the flow. You're delaying things. Reliable trades are a big important thing too.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that when you're done this point.
But another thing was knowing when to renovate, but also when not to renovate or to renovate less. So one property you guys funded for us last year was a townhouse in a bit of a rougher area.
Okay.
That didn't call for a high-end reno. And we closed on this property and spent 2 weeks renovating it. $20,000 reno in 2 weeks.
I remember this one.
Had it on the market. I believe we sold it the first weekend, and they closed something like 2 weeks later. I think we owned this property from purchase of close to purchase of sale, including renovation, sale, and time to close, I think a month and a half. It was like 60 days, 50 something days.
In 2023, that was insane.
Yeah.
In 2021, that was kind of the norm.
Yes. But with the reno and all of that timeline. So part of that was we did renovate it, but we decided to do the right things to make it go quickly and to keep it affordable in an area that didn't justify the higher prices. And we made a really good margin on that, in part because we didn't hold it that long. There wasn't all these extra, holding and carrying costs. So we were able to get in and out very quickly. Yeah, you guys funded that deal at a higher ratio, I believe, for us as well, which also made sense.
Because we talked about that, because you knew that going in. But you're not renovating above the community standard.
Yeah.
I.e., you're not going to put a Ferrari in a Honda Civic garage.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. One other thing I'd love to pick your brain about is managing contractors. You have a team. A lot of people will come back to us, some investors, especially the newer ones, and they'll say, hey, I'm having trouble creating alignment with my contractor. They say it's going to cost this much. I only think it's going to cost this much. They said it was going to take 4 weeks. Here we are at week 16. How do you hold that third party accountable, and what are some ways that you can do that?
Well, for one, whatever you think it's going to cost and however long you think it's going to take, it's going to cost more and take longer.
Okay, so contingency, time and money. Okay,
that's just the rule. Even for me, it's still the rule. But one is when you're working regularly with contractors, so you get to know who you're working with, and you can then trust their judgment and their opinion. One thing we do that I don't necessarily recommend, but this is once you know and trust your contractors, we don't really quote most of our jobs. We work with contractors who work on daily rates.
Okay.
Basically, essentially hourly, but for the day. So these are people we trust. They're not going to be, dilly-daddling on site, not showing up, whatever. A lot of these contractors work almost exclusively for us anyways.
Okay.
And they show up, they work, they get paid for the day. And they know that when they finish this house, they're going to go work on another one.
Right.
But the nice thing about that is a lot of renovations tend to come with surprises.
Yes.
It's very hard to quote, especially something like a hoarder house. Okay, step one is junk it out. And then now I need to pause so you can quote out what needs to be done.
Right.
Right?
Because you just don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
What's behind it? Did the plumbing break because there wasn't power for a while or heat? what about, are we going to take out those walls? Oh, there was mold there that I didn't know about. I was hoping wasn't going to be there, but
there's 20 cats behind that wall.
We've only found a few petrified cats.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Rats, cats, birds. Yeah, we find some things. But when you're working on a day rate, demo cleanup crew's done, contractor starts the next day, because it doesn't matter what it looks like. They know they're working. You're going to have to immediately work on the plan but they can start tearing out other things they need to do, or start working on the part of the project they know need to do. So you're shortening that timeline that way. But part of that is having trusted trades. When you don't have the trusted trades, it becomes a lot harder. Even when they are trusted, you need to have someone, yourself or a third party, showing up on site regularly.
Okay.
Even having a contractor, even a trusted one, who sends you pictures at the end of the day or regularly sends you picture updates. It is amazing how even contractors who you work with often, this wall's painted and that one isn't. And so the picture's on an angle that only gets this wall, doesn't get that hole in that wall, right?
Right.
You get just kind of the best angles without the problems.
Why aren't we done this? Oh, because this.
Yeah, but you only get the best angles of what was done. And then you show up later and you're like, oh, this is so much worse than I was expecting it to be.
Right.
Or it's not complete. And attention to detail on higher end flips or even average flips is sorely lacking. There's just little things. Why is this crooked? There's holes there. Sometimes you need to learn to let go of those when there's lighter flips. One of our painters that we use, he needs everything to look perfect, but he painted that house that we did the 20K reno in 2 weeks. And I said, you're not allowed more than 2 coats on anything. It's like, well, what? It's going to bleed. Paint 2 coats. And at the end, when you're finished everything, point out to me what you want to give another coat to. You're not allowed painting a 3rd coat without my permission.
Right. But that just goes to producing to the neighborhood standard, though.
Yes. And it's not that I'm not saying don't do a 3rd coat. So you're not doing it on everything as a standard. You're doing it only on the things that I go through. Yeah, that door bled through. You need to paint that again, right?
Well, perfect doesn't exist, right? Every house is imperfect in its own way, and not every renovation is going to be, 99% is better than 100% if 100% takes twice as long.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So someone who's flipping like 1 to 3 properties, they have a new contractor.
Yeah.
Do you have any best practices for like daily they get photos, they walk the property once a week? Like what's some tactical stuff from the learning lessons that you've experienced?
Yeah, there's a balance between your contractor feeling like you're micromanaging, questioning everything. Understand that not everything is perfect. I was, I don't know, fortunate is the word, but when I started my first rental I bought in 2007, turned into a 10-bedroom rooming house, and I did a lot of the work myself. Worked with the contractor. And then I worked for the contractor because I ran out of money to pay for materials for that house. So I worked for the contractors in the summer renovating basement apartments. So I've worked with my hands and I've done a good amount of renovations myself. So I understand the work that goes in. And I've seen people walk in and they go, why isn't this plaster job perfect? And I go plaster that raw drywall yourself. Try your best, do absolutely everything you can to make that perfect. And when it's not, come back and tell me why it isn't perfect, right? I'm not saying that the job should be bad, especially a new build and a professional plasterer. Like they should be able to do it, but not everything comes out the way you want it to when you're doing construction. So having a bit of lenience in that way, not making them necessarily tear it out, but fix the things that need fixing. But it doesn't mean every little dot. But some other things, it's worth getting internet on site. Sometimes we use rocket hubs or wireless modems that can use a SIM card. So we can put internet on site and then put a camera, like a Wise camera, on site.
I like that.
I want to at least see the driveway. So now I know, did they show up? Because they say, the plumber says, oh yeah, I'll be there. I'll go there today. You're texting the plumber all day. Hey, did you go? Did you go? Well, I can just check my camera app for alerts. Nobody was in the driveway. So
smart, very smart.
That helps save so much, because that communication when you're not hearing back from someone who says that they're going to do something is so frustrating.
And you suspect the worst. Yeah.
And whether you use the wireless modem, like I said, or just honestly pay for internet, on the cost of a flip for a $50 setup charge, $10 a month modem rental, and like a $50 plan.
That's a rounding error.
Yes, it's absolutely worth it. And then from that and the other benefit is this can help prevent break-ins, right? So you can get a camera on site. Some people aren't going to be comfortable, but also for the contractor, this is protecting your tools. You can leave your tools on site. You're not getting, this is going to protect your tools from being stolen.
one of the toughest things about my job as an underwriter is managing expectations of people. And what you just talked about was, how do you frame a requirement or what could be viewed as a policing item? Something from figure weighing to, hey, this benefits us. Like, how are we framing things so that it benefits everybody? So the contractor, we're actually looking after your tools, man.
Yeah.
Or her, whomever.
And also not being like, hey, I was watching you as you nailed that baseboard in. Why did you do it this way?
Yeah.
That's very uncomfortable.
Right. There's a level of scrutiny that you want to apply, but just like, oh, hey, I saw you working, like you put in a ton of hours that look like the work's really moving along. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, more carrots, less sticks.
Yeah. You told me you were going to have 3 guys every day this week. It's Wednesday and there's 1 guy every day.
That's a stick scenario, but yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different ways, and contractors can all be different. There are ways as well in contracts that you can incentivize finishing sooner. Hey, if you get this done by this date, you get a bonus.
Right.
Or if you don't get it done by this date, we subtract this much from the contract price. Carrot or stick. There's
yes.
2 different. Yeah, you can incentivize contractors that way. Timeline really matters. That the flip that I lost the most money on, the market was falling. This was 2017.
Okay.
When in Ontario, the government had changed some rules. I lost 90 grand on a flip, and that hurt a lot at the time. It was a big number for me at the time. And the market was falling while I was trying a new contractor who underquoted the job, dicked me around for months. And then when they couldn't, when he knew he wouldn't be able to finish at the price, they just took their tools and left. So I was months delayed. And then I hired another contractor, and the work wasn't that great.
Yeah. So
I was trying to sell this. I was carrying it with private money, and I was supposed to be selling this house in like August with a nice pool. And I had to close the pool and then list it in November. And so the pool was almost more of a detriment at that point than the asset it would have been listing in the summer. So all of those factors combined, I lost 90 grand on that flip, and that hurt a lot.
Yeah.
But it was a combination of contractor issues. And there was also probably some ego, because that was, the market was so hot at the beginning of 2017, and then the market changed because of these government rules. And I read them and I said, these are not a big deal.
Right.
But I didn't take into the fact kind of herd mentality. And that doesn't matter if they're a big deal if everyone believes they are.
Opinions make markets.
Yes, exactly.
Right or wrong.
Yes, that's a good way. Opinions make markets. So I didn't take that into account, and I should have.
That's awesome.
Very interesting. How has managing cash flow in your business, has it been the same through, day one to kind of today? Do you have any principles of, because we see people, in the past, they're successful doing 1-2 deals. They bought 4 or 5, cash flow becomes an issue.
Right.
They bit off more than they can chew.
And then when the ship sinks, it does so quickly. Yeah.
Do you have any tips, or how do you manage accounting cash flow in your flips?
I think it's a little different in my business because it's a volume of houses, so there's always kind of some coming in and out. So it's managing not the entirety of all of the projects. I guess it is, but it's not managing the entire timeline of the other projects, because some of those are going to sell as we're buying other ones. My management is kind of having more of a buffer. And again, with the volume, what that ends up being is buying some, often more remote properties, harder to finance properties, things like that, just in cash. So as those turn over, I get that money back. But also, again, if I have excess cash, I still want to have it available, but I'll buy something in cash, knowing that I can refinance that. I can go to you guys and say, hey, can you refinance this property for me? That I can put that money into a property that I'm flipping, knowing it's almost, I can pull it out like a line of credit almost. If I needed to, I can ask you guys for, hey, could you guys fund this next week, please?
Yeah.
And then I can get that capital back because I have to buy something else. That also tends to give me a buffer, like, hey, I got a great deal, but I need to close quickly. But if you're not doing kind of the volume, it's still a matter of having that extra buffer. You need to be able to know that you're going to be able to pull that money from somewhere, whether that is just having a spare line of credit with a bunch of room on it, or, a best friend who's offered to, pitch in if you need to, as long as you're 100% sure on that. But,
yes.
You need to have just excess cash, plan to have more than you need. It allows you to seize opportunities as well. So it's not just like, yes, there's a cost to borrowing more than I need. You could go, well, you know what? I'm doing this one flip, and Calvert, your rate's a little bit better if I borrow at 65% loan to value.
Sure.
But maybe I'm going to borrow 80% loan to value so that I have the extra cash in case I need it.
What's the opportunity cost of that sunk capital?
Yes. And yes, that is going to cost me money, but it could cost me a lot more money to not have that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we've built our products the way we have is leverage can be a dangerous thing for some people, but if you're willing to borrow more with less down, you can actually get a higher ROI.
Yes.
Because you're getting more out of your capital, whereas some people would rather just limit their costs. So it totally depends on the business model. A lot of great tips there.
Yeah.
So 1,000 homes. Do you want to talk a bit about your best and worst deal? Now, these don't need to be absolutes because I know I've seen some of the great ones. I've seen some of the crazy ones.
Yeah.
Or most interesting deal. Like, what is the most memorable deal that you have done as a flipper where you just think that was great, that was terrible, that was memorable for whatever reason? What's one that burns up?
There's so many. The worst deals are the one I was talking about, that one where I lost 90 grand. There was another one that was quite rough. It was waterfront on Lake St. Clair near Windsor. And the conservation authority out there was just horrible. Anytime anyone was interested in this property, tell them, oh no, the septic's condemned and this and that. But they didn't have the right to condemn the septic and had never inspected it. But it was in a floodplain, so you couldn't get a new septic system. And there was basically no way to keep this house without a septic system. But the current one was functioning. But they said it wasn't and would tell people it wasn't because it was in a floodplain. And anyways, I owned this thing for like 2 years and lost 50 grand. So I lost less than the other one, but the time of dealing with that headache, I think a buyer backed out on it as well. We had to sue them for it. We got a small amount back, but it was just such a nightmare. That was a flip because of the effort in dealing with it.
Right.
Some of the stuff, even you break even, but you deal with it for 2 years. That's just very
your time is worth something, right?
Yes.
Like So conservation authority. So make sure that there's no restrictions on title or anything like that that could affect the marketability.
Exactly, yeah.
Like can we address any marketability deficiencies and to what degree of confidence?
Yes. We've had so many interesting and good deals. Just one so many good stories. I love them. A flip we did recently in Ottawa. Sellers had owned this house for like 40 years. But the lady who owned this house owned it outright in Ottawa. There'd been no heat in the house for 7 years, I believe. She hadn't been living in the house. There was so much stuff in the house that 3 years prior she had lived in her car for the winter in her driveway in Ottawa because couldn't use the house. And then next winter lived in a shelter while owning a house with no mortgage in Ottawa. And then we ended up buying this house, and it took 25 bins to empty it.
So for how big is a bin?
Yeah.
How big is a bin? I think
24 to 30 cubic yards. 25 of those big driveway dumpsters to empty this house. I was surprised that power was still on. The waterbed in the basement was great. Still full of water. The food everywhere, but like the freezer in the basement still full of food, and we're finding things that are expired. We just bought another hoarder house last week, and I was there cleaning it out, and there's some digestant called Fermentol that you can buy, I guess. It expired in 1986, and it's just out on the shelves in their pantry, covered in just like mouse feces, and the walls are coated in insect droppings and things like that. We've had deals where we've assigned for 6 figures plus. We've had several flips that we've made multiple 6 figures on. I guess some of the best ones profit-wise would be ones that were just like very quick and easy and still made a very good margin. Yeah, some of the ones I like are the ones that we were able to solve one small problem on it.
Right.
Actually, you know what? My first flip that I bought, I'll say this is one of my favorites. My first flip that I bought when I started doing this full-time in 2016. Thanksgiving 2016, I was looking on realtor.ca, not on the realtor side of the MLS, but the public MLS. And there was a house that was listed. And I just sold another house in Brampton. And this was in Brampton. So I'd been looking at the market, had an idea, looked like a good deal. And this was a hot market, 2016, right?
Yep.
Hot market. And it looked like a good deal. So I emailed my realtor. I said, can I get more info about this property? And they said, oh, weird. It's not on the Toronto Real Estate Board. And contacted the agent. Oh, they were an agent from out of town that were listing the property for their brother. And this was the Friday before the long weekend. They listed it on their board and wanted to cross list onto the Toronto board. but it didn't make it in time for the long weekend. So because it was listed on another board, it showed up on the public MLS on the realtor.ca, but it didn't show up on the Toronto real estate board where, buyers get alerts.
Right.
And local
Realtors
Toronto
get
realtors
alerts,
are looking for properties. So I saw this on the Sunday of Thanksgiving long weekend, offered and bought it on the Monday, because this would have sold in multiples for much above the price. But because people weren't viewing this property, I was able to buy it around asking, very good price. And I was able to buy that property before all the local agents saw it and were able to offer on it. I ended up renovating that property, sold it, made $85,000.
Good for you.
And then right around the same time, I bought another one on the MLS in competition in an area where 4-bedroom homes sold for a good amount more than 3 bedrooms, which isn't everywhere. 2 bedrooms usually sell for less than 3s, but 3s don't always sell for less than 4s. In this area of Brampton, they did. It was a 4-bedroom home, according to the impact, but the previous owner took down a wall to make a bigger master bedroom. So I bought this, did a light reno, put a wall back up, bought it in competition, listed on the MLS as a 4-bedroom, sold it, made a $75,000 profit. So kind of poorly listed properties, mislisted, and adding bedrooms when you can, and it adds enough value in the area. There's opportunities like that on
increasing
properties all
the utility.
Time. Those were both MLS properties, and there's opportunities out there all the time. It just takes a lot of digging.
Cool. Well, we've talked about a lot. Before we wrap this up, kind of, if you had a looking glass ahead, where is your energy? Where is your excitement? What are you looking forward to for the rest of 2024 as an investor?
Yeah, I'm trying to pick up more flips for the rest of 2024. I think we're going to see investors pulled back heavily with the interest rate hikes.
Right.
I think we're going to see those interest rates slowly coming down. And with that, slowly more investors coming back into the market. That will give a little more demand on the wholesale side for us. If investors want to buy, like I said, we often send it to our buyers list. If someone wants to buy it, great. If we don't, then it's a good deal. We'll do it ourselves. But I'm still looking for flips, including occasionally I buy stuff on the MLS. So I still think there's opportunities there because a lot of investors are scared. People think you can't flip. People are scared of flipping. So I think there's opportunities there, and I'm going to be flipping those opportunities. I don't know when, but we're slowly going to see it come back, and investors are going to come back in the game. And at that point, I'll likely be assigning more of those properties. But in the meantime, I still think there's not a lot, but there's still opportunities out there, and I'll be working those to flip. Yeah.
Perfect.
And past that, I think if people can keep control of construction costs, there's opportunities to convert multifamily. In Ontario specifically,
right?
You're now allowed in most areas to convert to 3 units, sometimes 4.
Right.
Almost as of right in most single family homes. So I think there's simple ways to set up homes. I've seen a lot. One of the ways I really like, because construction costs are one of the things that kill you here.
Yes.
Are for example, property I had as rental. It was a 3-level side split, 3 bedrooms up, living room, kitchen, dining on split level. And then there was a basement. So really kind of 2 floors functional. But off the living dining room, an addition had been built in the 80s. It was about 350 square feet and had a bathroom in it. And took that house, made that 350 square foot addition a bachelor apartment legally as a second unit. It's a bachelor, 350 square feet.
Sure.
It already had a bathroom, added a kitchen, did its own heat source with electricity, so separate electrical meter. Main house had its own gas furnace, its own electrical meter. It was a full house, plus this extra apartment on the side that cost very little compared to doing a full duplex conversion. So now I have a legal duplex. Maybe doing a basement apartment would get $1,800 to $2,000 in rent in that area for like a large 3-bedroom basement apartment. But a bachelor is still $1,300, but it costs significantly less to get that done. So I think there's opportunities like that. Before, people always look for bungalows, so they could do one level. Well, take a 2-floor home apartment, and then each floor is an apartment. Each floor is a 2-bedroom apartment now, including semi-detached homes.
Yeah.
Just because they share a wall doesn't mean they can't be 3 units. So there's a lot of opportunities to do things like that. And with coach houses as well, we built a couple of coach houses and garden suites.
Yeah, we're seeing that with the increased density, if you will.
I think some of these things, as you do them, they're harder to refinance because they're harder to value, to get appraised.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back into that philosophy I was talking about, like where I close on some things as cash and I leave kind of that in it. I see this as like when I look at my rentals, I don't want to have too high of an overall loan to value in my portfolio. That doesn't mean I can't be high in one and low on another.
Right.
Then I feel like it actually buffers my risk. So I might be willing to leave more money in one because I built the garden suite and it didn't appraise as high. But I'm getting better rental returns on that house proportionate to my mortgage costs.
Right.
So it buffers my whole portfolio.
Cool. So density changes. I think that pretty much
we covered a lot. Any other words of wisdom, either in real estate or outside of real estate, that you think would be of value to the listeners that we didn't touch on?
I don't know what we didn't touch on. I think just taking action. I think you learn from doing in this industry. That doesn't mean going blind, but find some people that can give you advice and then take careful action. But you're going to learn from doing properties, and there's opportunities out there always. When people are saying you can't flip, sometimes that's the best time to flip because you don't have the competition. Same thing in every other strategy. When people tell you can't do something, try to ask yourself, how can I do this? What would it have to look like for this to make sense right now? And find a way to do that, because you're not going to be competing with everyone else.
Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful.
I'm no Warren Buffett, but
yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing all that wisdom on the wholesale side, on the flipper side. Like I said, we've worked together for many years now. I've had a peek under the hood. Nothing but respect and admiration for you and your team and how you guys operate. You run a top shelf operation, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with you. And I love watching you succeed and kick ass. It's a lot of fun. If people want to engage with you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people want to reach out to me, Instagram is the best way. So at Luc Self Wealth. So LUC Self Wealth. And otherwise, if they want to join our buyers list for Ontario or Montreal, or for the Vancouver area as well, Ontario, BC, and Quebec, they can go to Off Market Bliss, BLISS.ca, and then they have the option to sign up for the different buyers lists there.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. We have some Stampede to enjoy, so we're going to go and do that. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
That wraps up another episode of the Real Estate and Wealth Podcast. Be sure to hit that like button, share with fellow real estate enthusiasts, and subscribe to stay in the loop on all upcoming episodes. Get in touch with the team at Calvert Home Mortgage Investment Corporation by calling them at 1-888-752-4642 or email admin@chmic.ca. The opinions expressed in each episode belong to the individuals featured and do not represent the views of Calvert Home Mortgage. While we provide valuable insights, consulting with qualified professionals ensures that your unique financial circumstances are carefully considered, aligning your investments with your long-term objectives. Calvert Home Mortgage Investment Corporation is not a financial advisor, and we cannot advise you on making investments. There are risks to investing in real estate and the potential that you can lose all of your investment.